everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. So today I wanted to do a really fun video and one that I think is really exciting, and that is if you like this, then you might like this. So it's basically a recommendation video where I take one book and I recommend you another book that is kind of similar, has similar themes, or some kind of similar aspect to it that I think you might like based on the fact that if you like the first book. This video has been going around a lot of other channels, and so I thought it was a really great idea, and I wanted to recommend some books based on some other books that I love. And really there was a book that I read recently that I really enjoyed, and it really reminded me of another book, so I was like, why don't I recommend this in a video along with some other ones, and it'll be a good time. Also, I will say these books like vary in genre and form, so it's gonna be a wild ride. You're gonna expand your reading horizons, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So here we go. Okay, so the first pairing that I have for you is If You Liked Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which is kind of this character who goes to university for the first time, and she's kind of a wallflower, really introverted, and she writes a lot of fan fiction as well, and she has like this really big following, and so it's kind of her story and her kind of opening up and trying to do new things. And so I felt like this book really reminded me of Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. So I recently just read this and I absolutely loved it. It has some really great mental health rep as well. The main character has anxiety, and that's a really big part of the book. But reading this, I felt like it was so similar to Fangirl in the sense that the main character, Eliza, she does these web comics, so you can kind of see like the drawings over here. She's the creator of this really famous series called The Monstrous Sea, and so she has like this huge following, and there's kind of this anxiety that follows having this huge following of people. And it's her kind of dealing with that. But she is in high school, so it's a little bit different from Fangirl, but she's kind of learning to open up when she meets this guy at her school named Wallace. And this was, guys, like this was the most precious romance on the planet, and I thought it was just so cute. This book does get a little bit more dark and intense than Fangirl, but it's still a really great book, and I absolutely loved it. And I think that if you liked Fangirl, you might like Eliza and Her Monsters. So I won't be doing this for the other books, but for this one I felt like I also had another book that kind of relates to Fangirl and to Eliza and Her Monsters, and that is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. So I feel like this one is a little bit more similar to Eliza and Her Monsters. So if you like this, you might like An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, just because the main character, so she's a YouTuber and she has like this huge following, and she kind of falls into the trap of fame, and I thought that that was a really interesting thing. This book kind of goes into the sci-fi territory, but very little. I just thought it was interesting the way that the main character's character kind of devolves as she gets sucked into fame. So it's a different look at fame than Eliza and Her Monsters, but you do see the anxiety involved in that crazy fame, so it's a really interesting kind of comparison. So if you wanted something more adult, this might be what you're looking for. All right, this next pair I feel like is super similar, and they're both really cute and really fun. So if you liked The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, I think you should try reading They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I think if you like this one, then you should read this one, and if you like this one, you should read this one. Like, they're interchangeable in that sense. Both of these books features like a romance that kind of takes place over one single day, and I thought that that was like a really interesting kind of concept. I love those kind of spontaneous romances. They're super cute. This book features our two main characters, Natasha and Daniel. So Natasha is Jamaican American and Daniel is Korean American, and the two of them meet spontaneously on the street one day, and so literally 24 hours before Natasha's family is about to be deported back to Jamaica. So it's this really stressful kind of situation, but the two of these guys kind of learn to fall for each other. And I also thought it was interesting because both of the characters are very different. Natasha's very kind of rational and scientific, whereas Daniel is very dreamy and loves poetry and thinks he can make her fall in love with him in a day. And so with They Both Die at the End, the premise is basically that these two characters, Rufus and Mateo, get this call from this apparatus called the Death Cast, which basically calls you like the day that you're gonna die and lets you know that you're gonna die. This is kind of a bit of a sci-fi, but not completely. And so the two of them get on this app called the Last Friend app, looking for someone to hang out with on their last day, and they meet each other, and it's just this really beautiful gay romance, and I absolutely loved it. They both have pretty high stakes in this single day romance, so I feel like they're pretty good comparisons. Okay, these next two books I feel like are super underrated, and I really love them. So the first one is The Star Touch Queen by Roshni Chakshi. I absolutely love this book. Basically, this book is like an Indian inspired fantasy, and the main character has like this horrible horoscope that says that she is like gonna cause the deaths of a bunch of people, and her dad just wants to like marry her off in like a political marriage and get rid of her. And so she ends up getting married off to this guy named Amar, and he's like the king of Acheron, and you find out later that Acheron is kind of the like kingdom of the dead. It's basically like a Hades and Persephone retelling, but like Indian style, and it's just great. It's just a fabulous story. I loved it. I loved it so much more than I thought I would. And I really like the main character, Maya. She's very kind of strong-hearted and strong-willed. Not only does this kind of draw on Hades and Persephone, but it also kind of draws on the story of Cupid and Psyche. So if you know that myth, it's kind of similar to that as well. And so I thought that this was pretty similar to Winter Song by S.J. Jones. So this is kind of a similar story. The main character's name is Liesel, and it's set in kind of, I think, the 18th century. And all throughout her childhood, she's heard these like mystical stories of the Goblin King, who lives underground and takes young pretty girls as his kind of hostages. And so the story really kicks off when Liesel's sister gets taken underground by the Goblin King, and so Liesel goes down underground to save her sister and ends up kind of falling for the Goblin King, similar to the way that Maya starts to fall for the king of the underworld. So these two have that kind of similar aspect of a romance with like someone that they probably shouldn't fall in love with, but they're both really beautifully written stories. They're both filled with beautiful imagery and some really exciting magic, so I think you might like either of them. All right, the next two books are both kind of underrated, so I would love it if you picked up both of them. So the first one is The Winter's Curse by Marie Rutkowski, and if you like this, I feel like you should try picking up Graceling by Kristen Cashore. So these can kind of go vice versa. If you like this one, then you might like this one. Both of these are fantasies. I will say this one involves a lot more magic, whereas this one's basically magic free. This one's more political, but this one does have quite a bit of politics in it as well. If you don't know Graceling, it's basically follows our main character Katza, and it's set in this like fantasy world where people have these things called graces. So they're like very specific powers or magical powers. So Katza's ability is to kill. So she's a very good assassin basically, and she's the assassin to the king of her kingdom. And she ends up meeting this prince from another kingdom whose grace is combat skills. So the two of them kind of end up practicing together and also ending up in a interesting situation and on a mission, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of political intrigue into it and some really exciting magic, but I feel like even with the magic, it's not like, you know, dragons and like crazy creatures and everything. It's very kind of character-centric magic, so I thought that that was a really cool part of it. This one's pretty similar in the sense of the political intrigue. So it follows our main character, who is the daughter of a general in this country that has colonized this other country, and so they're kind of like imperialists, and they've taken over and they've enslaved all the people who used to live there. And so she's the daughter of this general, and one day she's out in the market and she ends up going to this slave auction and buys this slave named Aaron, and for a much steeper price than she was intending to. And it's this concept of the winner's curse, where you pay more than you were expecting to, and even though you won the like auction, you still feel like you lost. So she ends up taking this guy as her slave, but the situation kind of gets turned on her when she starts to realize like the wrongness of everything that her country is doing to these enslaved people, and starts to kind of sympathize with the enslaved. It's a really interesting story. It's totally underrated, and I feel like it's actually quite amazing. So you should definitely check out both of these. I love both of them, and I feel like if you enjoyed one, you'll probably enjoy the other. Okay, this next pair is a bit of a stretch, but I feel like it could work. I definitely read both of them pretty close together, and I enjoyed both because they have some similar aspects. So the first one is the Illuminate files. So I only have Gemina with me right now. So if you like the Illuminate files, which is basically like this epic space opera kind of sci-fi series with like multiple battleships and like, you know, crazy AIs and characters that are just absolutely hilarious. It's also told in a very unique format with like IMs and messages and spaceship plans and a bunch of other stuff, but also some really strong and interesting characters. So if you like the sci-fi aspect of this book, I would recommend trying Scythe by Neil Shusterman and like the whole series. So they are quite different in tone. The Illuminate files are pretty kind of funny, and they have like an ensemble cast, and they're kind of all over the place. But with the Arc of Scythe, it's more focused on a like small set of characters. But I do feel like the sci-fi aspect of these books is pretty similar in the sense that they're both set very far in the future, and they both feature an AI character that is a very big part of the series. In this one, the AI is a lot more psychotic. In this one, the AI is more kind of godly, but the AI character is a bit more prominent in the second book of this series, so you'd kind of have to wait for the second book, but it's definitely worth the payoff, let me tell you. If you don't know what Scythe is about, it's basically set hundreds of years into the future where humanity has kind of conquered death and disease, and so now no one really dies. And so because of that, there is like this organization of people called Scythes who are basically trained to kill people, and it's called like gleaning, and it's kind of curb population growth. So these two kids get taken as apprentices by the Scythe to become Scythes themselves and learn the art of killing, and things just kind of hit the fan. I will say that both of these series have really amazing plot twists, and I think that's one of the compelling things about it. They're both really great sci-fis, really great AI characters, and insane plot twists. Alright, this next one is kind of a stretch, but I feel like you might like both. So if you liked Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, I recommend trying Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. These two are pretty different in tone. This one has a female main character, this one has a male main character, but they both deal with mental illness in a very kind of strong and powerful way. They're also both written in kind of this literary-ish style, and the trajectory of the character's kind of emotional journey is pretty similar, I feel like. Basically, if you don't know, Turtles All the Way Down follows our main character, Eliza, and she's a 16-year-old girl with OCD, and so she's kind of dealing with that on a daily basis and kind of her thought spirals. And she, along with her friend, end up in the situation where they're trying to solve the murder of one of their classmates' fathers, and there's like this reward out for solving this murder, but it's less about kind of the mystery and more about her mental health and her own personal journey, and as she starts to fall for the boy whose father they're trying to find. I don't actually think it's a murder, I think like the mystery is like he's gone missing. And then with Perks of Being a Wallflower, the main character's best friend commits suicide in elementary school, so he's just kind of reeling from that impact and starting high school for the first time, and he doesn't really have friends. He's a total wallflower, and so it's him kind of finding this group of friends and learning to open up, but then kind of the tragedies of his past start to creep up on him, and his mental health kind of takes a dive, and so there's that aspect to it. Both of these are very emotional journeys. They're definitely not light reads. They both kind of start out possibly light, and then they just take you through the ringer. So definitely like both hard-hitting reads. So I feel like if you enjoyed one, you will likely enjoy the other one. All right, and this last pair is two books that I read recently and I absolutely love. And I feel like they're quite similar in the sense that they both have a lot of family aspects to them, and they're both dealing with characters who are dealing with double identities. So these are pretty interchangeable because I feel like they're both super underrated, and they are American Panda by Gloria Chow and The Love and Lies of Ruksana Ali by Sabina Khan. So this book features a Taiwanese American main character, and this book features a Bengali American Muslim lesbian main character. So both of these books deal with the main characters kind of dealing with dual identities. So in this book, she's dealing with the fact that she's Taiwanese and American, and how she's a very like traditional and strict family, and she's starting at a new university for the first time, and she's grading against the expectations that her parents have for her and what she wants to do with her own life. And then with Ruksana Ali, she also comes from a very like traditional Bengali family, and she's grading against the expectations that they have for her to be straight. This one is more about her parents' expectations for her like love life and social life, and this one's more about her parents' expectations for career. But both these books have a really strong element of family, and one thing I really loved about both of them was the fact that the main characters have really complicated relationships with their mothers, and there is a very strong element of trying to work through that relationship, and I absolutely love that. I love any book with like a strong mother presence in it, so absolutely love that. And despite the covers, which seem pretty like fun and exciting contemporaries, these books are very intense at some points, very kind of harrowing and sad, but they both also have really fun and exciting parts to them as well. So they're definitely not like super light reads, but they're also just really great reads, and I absolutely love them, and I think you should read both of them. Okay, so those are all of the books that I wanted to recommend today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I actually really enjoyed kind of talking about these books in relation to each other, and I really think that all of the books that I mentioned in this video are just absolutely amazing. I think you should pick up all of them. So, you know, if I mentioned a pair and you hadn't read either of them, just go pick up both because they're great. But that is about all I have to say for this video, so thank you so much for watching, and please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!